What we're seeing from the literature is that, yes, we do need more studies for women, but a lot of the things that apply to men apply to women. It's just that we've been packaged. It's all been packaged differently for women. And I think that's the issue. And that's what's so confusing for women is like, oh, I'm a woman, so I need to go do light weights, or I can't lift heavy. Or on the other side of the spectrum, I'm entering perimenopause. I need to start lifting heavy to build muscle. And what we see is that there is a broad range of, you can lift relatively light, not too light, otherwise it's not going to do much, or you can lift heavy, or anywhere in between, and you can see muscle growth, no matter if you're a man or a woman or your age. So I think in general, the thing that's bothering me right now is that there's so much confusing advice. Like, you're a woman, so you need to train like this, or you're this age, so you need to train like this. Honestly, most people aren't even applying the basics of strength training or consistent with those basics. And if they were, they would get themselves, 99% of the way. Mm-hmm. Women really can perform very similarly throughout their cycle. They might feel different, and you can auto-regulate and adjust your training routine based on how you're feeling, which I think is a great idea. But you don't necessarily have to change it up so drastically each week. And I actually don't recommend that, because if not, you won't have continuity of training, and it gets really hard to progress. If you're doing something one week and then something different the next week and then something different the next week, it's really difficult for you to add progressive overload, go up in weight, start to see progress. So I think that there's a way in which we can tailor training for women where it's like, okay, let's not dismiss what you're going through in your cycle. Yes, you feel like crap right before you're about to start your period. Let's take care of you then. Maybe it just means you go a little lighter that day, or you don't do as intense of a workout as you typically would just because you don't feel great.
I have been very vocal about having to take a year and a half off of exercise. And I've been getting back into it in the last couple months. And that is basically what I've been doing to build back a routine. And I know that that's what so many people struggle with, right? It's how do I build a sustainable routine? And we have this tendency to go 0 to 100, myself included.
Yep.
And luckily I'm working with trainers and people who are like, no.
Yes.
We're doing 2 days a week in the beginning.
Yes.
And then we're adding another and then another. And I feel despite all of the health challenges that I've been dealing with and all of that, I'm in a better place fitness wise than I was even before all of that because of that approach.
Soreness is one of those things that's very misunderstood. We think, if I wasn't sore, I didn't do enough. And what we see from the literature is that soreness is a very poor indicator of the quality of your workout. We tend to get sore when we do a new movement. So if you do a new form of exercise or a new lift or something that your body's not familiar with, we tend to accumulate more soreness for whatever reason. And then the second reason we tend to accumulate soreness is if there's a heavy eccentric component, so the lowering phase. So think like a bicep curl. Lifting your arm up is the concentric, lowering it is the eccentric. So if you have a lot of heavy eccentrics in your routine where you're going down slow, those tend to cause more soreness and fatigue post-workout. Interestingly, they don't tend to cause more muscle growth, which is another myth. So people are like, oh, because I'm sore, I did a bunch of eccentrics, that means I'm building more muscle or my workout was more effective. It's not necessarily true. So light to no muscle soreness is actually ideal because you want to be fresh when you're going into your next workout. If you have a bunch of soreness from let's say you're working legs on Tuesday and then you want to go work them again on Thursday. If your legs are still really sore, you won't have as high quality of a workout. You won't be able to push yourself as hard in the gym, and therefore you won't see as strong of a stimulus, and you ultimately won't see as good of results. So I love the idea of don't worry about soreness. If you just push your lifts close to failure, which we can talk about, whether or not you're sore the next day, I don't really put much stock into it.
Mm-hmm. Why is it that you do get, or some people, myself included in the past, get really lean and toned from doing something like Pilates?
That's a really good question. I think that it's multifactorial. Mm-hmm. When we think about toning, what does that really mean? I think that if we take it back to the beginning, what does that mean? Getting more toned is body recomposition, which means losing fat and gaining muscle, or losing fat and being able to see the existing muscle underneath. So fat loss is typically a component of getting more toned or looking more toned. And fat loss primarily comes from diet, not exercise. We see from study after study that exercise only creates a little bit of fat loss in the beginning. And then after that, it tends to plateau. So maybe like a few pounds after a few months of exercising, if you're not changing and adapting your diet. So exercise is not a big indicator of fat loss in the long term. Now, building muscle, what are the effects of muscle building on metabolism? It's a complex interplay, but that's going to be like more of a long time horizon where you're building muscle and your metabolism's improving, might have some effects on creating a leaner body or being able to maintain leanness, things like that. But toned aesthetic comes primarily from a combination of diet and then building muscle. So if that person is changing their diet and they're losing fat, or maybe they're sedentary and they're going from no movement or not a lot of movement to Pilates where they are adding more movement, they might lose a couple of pounds at first, and then that will quickly plateau. Can their Pilates method be building muscle? Maybe. Some Pilates methods can if they're applying the principles of strength training. And then there's also some people that just have, I don't want to blame genetics. I hate when people just do that.
No, but it's such a huge factor.
It is a huge factor. And there are some people that are like, genetically, they don't have to apply the science in order to see results. Because when we're looking at the data, there's outliers with everything where it's like, what is that person? That person did like 60 reps and they're building all this muscle. It's like, but that's not the majority of the population. I think there's so much confusing advice. How do I train if I'm a woman versus if I'm a man? If I'm this age, if I'm this age, if I'm whatever, how do I integrate Pilates? If you just do these 4 things, you will see muscle growth. And then if you want body recomposition or that toned look, then you have to combine diet in there as well. But these 4 things are what's important for building muscle. So it's called the REPS framework, REPS. So each letter stands for a different component of this. So R is repetitions, getting close to failure in 30 reps or less. So the science shows that you can lift heavy for like 6 reps all the way up to 30 reps. As long as your last rep is slow and hard, which means taking it close to failure, that is the stimulus required for muscle growth. So if you like to lift a little bit lighter and do all the way up to 25 reps, great. If you want to lift a little bit heavier and do 6 reps, great. As long as your last rep is really, really slow, you have to eke out that last rep. Like you're like, I am trying as hard as I can to lift this weight and I don't think I can do very many more. So you need to get close to failure in 30 reps or less. 30 reps or higher is not shown to be very effective for muscle growth. So that's kind of where a lot of these high rep training methods come in and why they aren't usually as effective for muscle growth, just because you're not lifting heavy enough. You don't have enough load to the muscle. So that's R, repetitions. E is exercise selection. So choosing exercises that are simple and target one muscle group at a time. So we see on Instagram the combination moves where you're doing a lunge and a row at the same time, or you're doing these side lunges with these rows. And it's like, this works your back and your legs and your core and all these things. The issue with that is that if we go back to the reps or the repetitions, is that you're not actually getting close to failure in any of those muscle groups. So it's hard. You'll be out of breath. You might burn a little bit, but your shoulders might be getting a lot more work than your legs. So you might as well separate those 2 lifts out. Focus on the legs in one lift, focus on the shoulders in another lift, take both of those close to failure, and you're a lot better off than just trying to combine everything into one exercise. So that's exercise selection. P is protein. Everybody knows this by now, but eating enough protein is crucial because if you're applying the training stimulus, but you don't have the building blocks via food, you won't see the same results. So 0.75 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. And then the S is structure. So this is very important, often overlooked. We want to work our bodies enough, but not too much. Work each muscle group 2-ish times per week on non-consecutive days with 48 hours in between. So if you're going to work legs on Tuesday, work legs again on Thursday or Friday. So put some time in between, but we do want to work muscle groups around 2-ish times per week, especially the big ones like glutes, quads, chest, things like that. And then having recovery days is within that structure. So I like to think about the structure of my week is like, here are my lifting days, and here's when I'm going to work each muscle group throughout the week. And then here is my 2 recovery days where I'm not going to lift. I'm just going to do some light activity like walking, hiking, whatever it may be. And then adding in my cardio. So 150 minutes of light to moderate intensity cardio. For me, that's just brisk walking. Like I have a hilly neighborhood, so my husband and I just walk every day, and that's that. So that's really easy to integrate, almost as like a lifestyle piece. So fat loss can happen relatively quickly if you are in a calorie deficit, or even if you're in. A lot of people can recomp at maintenance calories. And again, I'm not formally trained in nutrition, but I've talked to a lot of nutritionists and dietitians about this. So fat loss can happen within like a couple weeks. It's not going to be drastic, and you don't want it to be drastic. Maybe half a pound a week is like kind of the most that you'll see. And if you're building muscle, you might not even see the scale change, by the way. But you can start to see fat loss relatively quickly. Muscle gain takes a little longer. The research shows typically 8 to 12 weeks is when you'll see visible change in muscle definition, or you'll see appreciable change in lean mass development. So around that 3-month mark is usually when people are like, oh, wow. Like if you're doing all the right things, you're really seeing big differences. You'll start to see differences before then. And then after a year, I like to give everybody a year. Like our whole thing is like, try to build 5 pounds of muscle in 1 year and spread it out. Give yourself a long time horizon so that you don't feel rushed, because we don't want you to overdo it, like we've just talked about. And it also gives you a lot of time to tinker and play, because these are the basics that we're talking about. But you might find that you have to be in a little bit of a calorie surplus, and that's when you see your body recomp the best. Or maybe you're in a slight deficit, or maybe you're in a bigger deficit than some other people. So it takes some tinkering sometimes. You also need to learn like how to lift close to failure. That's a learning process. How to do the exercises properly. That's a learning process. So after a year, you can really start to see your body physically transform. And then you're also at that point then getting the metabolic benefits that muscle provides. So 3 months to see sort of visual change, and then a year to kind of see really goals.